Okay, one of the favorite things around the country, and for many people when they think of barbecue, they think of pork, specifically pulled pork. So what is pulled pork? What part of the pig does it come from? Everybody's been to different places that have their different version of pulled pork. But for the most part, pulled pork is pork shoulder or Boston butt, which is this cut right here. And this one is bone in. You always want to cook bone in. That's our preference. We think the bone adds a little bit of flavor, that sort of thing. And there's a muscle that runs right, if this is the bone right here, there's a muscle that runs right around here. And those that cook on the competition circuit will know this as the money muscle. And a really good, well-cut barbecue is they can slice off that money muscle, make little medallions of pork while pulling the rest of this. So a true pit master will really show his skills when he knows how to cook it, so that both of those come out perfectly. What we do when we season it is we are going to add an injection to it. And we've got an injection made of salt, sugar, equal parts, a little bit of warm water, some Worcestershire sauce, and some apple juice. And so we're going to add that in. And for an 8 to 10 pound pork butt, which is what we've got here, we're going to want to add about 4 ounces. And you'll notice I move it around. I don't want any flavor pockets of that, so I will continually move that injection needle around to keep there from getting any flavor pockets. Now we're ready to apply our seasoning or our dry rub. I know a lot of people out there will tell you that they brine their pork. We've never liked that as well as injecting. We want to put a liberal amount of rub on. And again, you can use whatever flavor rub you want. If you want it hotter, you're going to use something with a little bit more pepper in it. If you want it sweeter, there's different types of sugar you can use. And this is what's going to form that really good bark or that really good crust that's going to be on the outside that people really love. And again, there are 2 sides. You'll notice we cook a pretty lean pork shoulder. Sometimes you'll get it and there'll be a pretty large fat cap on it. But feel free to trim some of that off. I know a lot of people will say, well, that's where all the flavor comes from. It's true. However, you're putting your spices on a product that you're not going to eat. So here's a little bit of fat, some gristle. We'll take that off. So here we go. We're going to cook this fat side up when we put it on the smoker, and it's going to cook about 8 to 10 hours, rest for a couple more in our cooler, and then we'll be ready to pull it and serve it. The pork butt's been on probably about 4 or 5 hours. Our ribs have been on a couple hours. One of the things we like to do during the cooking process, just to keep it moist, maybe for peace of mind, add a little bit of external flavor, is we'll hit the ribs with a little butter, and we're going to put a little apple juice on the pork. So here's our pork butt. And again, you can do this with a spray bottle. I've just got a little squirt bottle, just as long as you cover it. And you know, you want to wait at least 4 hours before you do this step to let your rub set. Then with the ribs, we just use regular squirt butter. And we're going to come back and do this a couple times. It just really adds a depth of flavor to the food, to your ribs, and the apple juice, perfect complement to the pork shoulder. So we got about an 8 or 10 pound pork butt that's been on there about 8 hours. It's reached 165 internal, which is right then when we want to wrap it, and we're going to add a little extra flavor to it by coating it with a little bit of brown sugar. We're going to put it back on the smoker and let it go for another 2, then we'll pull it off to rest for a while. Let's get that done. Now's the time, and a lot of people do different things. I always sprinkle on a little bit of brown sugar. That's going to melt, sweeten, and caramelize, and just add flavor to everything that we have already done to that pork butt. With our injection, with our rub, it just, all of it is a great enhancement. And again, always seam sides up, folds up. That way it keeps all the juices in while it goes back on the smoker. Okay, our meat's been back on the smoker after we wrapped it for about a couple hours. So we're ready to take it off. It's through cooking. We're gonna put it in the dry cooler to rest for another hour or two. It's gonna be really hot. We've got our insulated gloves on. We're gonna open our cooler. We've got lined with foil. It's that easy. We'll shut it up. Let it sit there for a couple hours. Then we'll come back. We're gonna slice that brisket. We're gonna pull that pork and you'll see the finished product. Okay, we're ready to pull our pork. If you remember, we had an 8 to 10 pound pork butt. When anytime you go into these restaurants, pulled pork, it's usually from the shoulder, a lot of times called the Boston butt. So if you go into your butcher or supermarket, club store, whatever, look for the piece of meat that is Boston butt. That's usually what it's going to be labeled out. Very rarely will you see a whole pork shoulder in there. So, and for the most part, when people cook pulled pork, they'll do it as a Boston butt. So, and again, we cooked it pretty lean. Ours was trimmed out pretty good. We had it on the smoker for about 6 to 7 hours. We wrapped it to let it finish cooking in its own juices. Pulled it out after a couple hours, put it back in the dry cooler where it's rested for about 2 to 3 hours. And in that dry cooler, don't worry about it cooling down. It can stay there 3 to 4, 5, 6 hours and be plenty warm. In fact, we've got our insulated gloves on to deal with this. And so when you pull this, just remember, it is very hot. So we put a little brown sugar on ours to add a little sweetness, and we're gonna put a little bit more in that. So the one thing you wanna know, remember it had the bone. One way you know if your pork is cooked is that bone will come out, be perfectly clean, perfectly dry. So you can set that. And again, there was that money muscle in the back. It's right there. You can set that there. You can slice that up for medallions, do whatever. But a lot of times it's just, you can do this with forks. They make tools to pull pork with. I just like to do that. And then again, you can mix it up with the juice. That juice that's there is that melted brown sugar. And let me tell you, you don't need any sauce on this pulled pork. You got a little bit of the bark, which is my favorite. It's got a good color. Man, that is really good. Pulled pork. It'll be a favorite at your barbecue table every day.